When the frosted glass door swung open and Marcus Chen found himself staring at Elena Sterling, half-dressed in her corner office,
This
he
might
knew
take a
his
bit
life
longer
was
than I
about to
thought.
change. He just didn't know whether it meant getting fired or something far more dangerous. The tool bag slipped from his fingers and crashed against the marble floor, shattering the profound silence that existed only in spaces where powerful people made decisions that changed lives without ever seeing the faces of those affected. The fluorescent light in Marcus's bathroom had been dying for 3 weeks, but he couldn't bring himself to fix it. Not because he didn't know how he'd rewired half the building where he worked, but because every time he looked at that burnt-out bulb, he saw another bill he couldn't pay. Another promise to his daughter Lily that he'd have to break. The light stuttered on at 4:47 in the morning, casting shadows across his face as he splashed cold water against his skin and stared at the stranger in the mirror. 4 years old and he looked 40. The lines around his eyes told stories he wished he could forget, and the calluses on his hands were a road map of every job he'd worked to keep a roof over their heads. Behind him, through the thin walls of their cramped Seattle apartment, he could hear Lily breathing softly in her sleep, that gentle rhythm that was the only music that mattered anymore. He'd been 18 when everything fell apart. One positive pregnancy test, one screaming match, one door slamming as Amanda walked out of his life before Lily even took her first breath. "I'm not ready to be a mother," she'd said, her voice cold and final. "You figure it out." And he had somehow. Possibly he had. 6 years of night classes, abandoned dreams of engineering school packed away in boxes he couldn't afford to store. Every ambition, every possibility, every version of himself that might have been all of it sacrificed at the altar of diapers and daycare, formula and rent, keeping one small human alive and safe in a world that didn't care if you were drowning. The maintenance job at Sterling Technologies paid enough to keep them afloat, barely. Marcus had started in the subbing pipes and unclogging drains, invisible to everyone who mattered. He'd worked his way up to general maintenance, which meant slightly better hours and the occasional glimpse of daylight, but it was still a job defined by other people's emergencies and his own exhaustion. Being a father wasn't his choice, but it was the best thing that ever happened to him. Marcus pulled on his work shirt, navy blue, with Sterling Technologies maintenance embroidered over the pocket, and grabbed his tool belt from the hook by the door. In Lily's room, he knelt beside her narrow bed and brushed a strand of dark hair from her forehead. She stirred, but didn't wake, her small hand curling around the stuffed rabbit he'd found at a thrift store for her 5th birthday. Tomorrow she'd ask again why she didn't have new shoes like the other kids at school, and his heart would break a little more, knowing he'd failed her in yet another small way that would add up over time into something he couldn't fix with a multimeter and a wire stripper. A soft knock at the door announced Margaret Foster, their 70-year-old neighbor, who watched Lily most mornings in exchange for help with her leaking sink and broken cabinet hinges. It was a fragile arrangement held together with favors and goodwill, but it was all he had. Margaret's weathered face creased into a smile as she slipped inside, moving with the practiced quiet of someone who understood what it meant to stretch every dollar until it screamed. Marcus's phone buzzed at 5:03. His stomach dropped even before he looked at the screen. Early calls were never good news. Chen. The voice belonged to David Park, the day shift supervisor, and he sounded harried. "I need you to handle an emergency call. Executive floor. Electrical issue in the CEO's private office wing." Marcus's hand tightened around the phone. The executive floor was 23 stories above his usual territory, a world of marble and mahogany that maintenance staff entered only when absolutely necessary. He'd been up there exactly twice in 3 years, both times to fix urgent problems while the executives were safely away at lunch or in meetings. The unspoken rule was simple: be invisible, be quick, and don't make eye contact. "Can't Martinez take it? I'm not scheduled until 7 and I've got to drop." Martinez called in sick. "Johnson is handling a flood in the parking garage. You're the only one with electrical clearance who's answering their phone." David's voice softened slightly. I know it's early, Marcus. I know you've got the kid, but this came from the top. CEO herself requested immediate response. Elena Sterling. Even her name carried weight that made the phone feel heavier in Marcus's hand. Everyone at Sterling Technologies knew the stories. 28 years old and already running a tech empire her father had built over 4 decades. She'd taken over 2 years ago when Robert Sterling suffered a stroke, and the business world had waited for her to fail. Instead, she'd streamlined operations, acquired 3 competitors, and doubled the company's value. The financial press called her a prodigy. The employees called her the Ice Queen, and not with affection. Marcus had seen her exactly once, moving through the lobby like a force of nature in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than his rent. She hadn't looked left or right, hadn't acknowledged the people who stepped aside to let her pass. Her face had been perfectly composed, beautiful in a way that seemed deliberately weaponized. Sharp cheekbones, dark eyes that missed nothing, mahogany hair pulled back in a style that suggested control over every detail. She'd terrified him from 50 feet away. The thought of being in the same room with her made his hands sweat. Fine, I'll be there in 40 minutes. 30, David corrected. The email said urgent, whatever that means when it comes from Elena Sterling. Marcus ended the call and stood motionless in his tiny kitchen, the dying light from the bathroom flickering overhead like a warning. He couldn't afford to lose this job. Not with Lily's school fees coming due, not with the landlord already circling about last month's late rent payment. He'd go to the executive floor, fix whatever needed fixing, and disappear back into the basement where he belonged. Simple, safe, survivable. The bus ride to Sterling Tower took 25 minutes through streets still dark with pre-dawn shadows. Marcus watched the city wake up through streaked windows, delivery trucks unloading, coffee shops flickering to life, other people stumbling toward their own obligations and compromises. He wondered how many of them felt like they were drowning too, just trying to keep their heads above water one more day. How many carried the weight of a small life depending entirely on their ability to show up, function, provide? Sterling Tower rose 63 stories into the Seattle sky, all steel and glass, a monument to ambition that seemed to mock everyone who entered through the service entrance. Marcus swiped his maintenance badge and took the freight elevator, watching the numbers climb with a sense of dread that tightened around his chest. Basement levels, ground floor. The numbers kept rising, carrying him away from familiar territory into a realm where people made millions while he scraped together enough for Lily's lunch money. The executive floor was quiet at 5:38. That kind of profound silence that only existed in spaces designed to intimidate. Marcus's footsteps echoed on marble floors so polished he could see his reflection. A ghost in work boots carrying a tool bag that seemed suddenly shabby against the backdrop of luxury. The work order said CEO's private office wing, electrical malfunction, lights and switches unresponsive. He followed the corridor past conference rooms with walls made entirely of glass, past abstract art that probably cost more than he'd earn in 5 years, past doorways that led to worlds he'd never be invited to enter. The CEO's wing occupied the corner of the building, separated from the rest of the executive floor by a reception area that looked like something from an architecture magazine. The lights were indeed out, leaving the space dim except for the gray wash of dawn creeping through floor-to-ceiling windows. Marcus found the electrical panel behind a mahogany door that blended seamlessly into the wall, labeled in small brass letters, "Authorized personnel only." He was authorized, technically, though he'd never felt less like he belonged anywhere. The panel revealed the problem immediately. A tripped breaker, probably from a power surge during the night. Simple fix. 5 minutes of work. Marcus pulled his multimeter from the tool bag and verified the readings. 0 volts on the main circuit, exactly as expected. He reset the breaker and heard the satisfying hum of electricity flowing through the system. Lights flickered on throughout the wing, and he allowed himself a moment of relief. Then he heard it, a voice from somewhere deeper in the office, sweet, female, and sharp with frustration. Finally, what took so long? Marcus's stomach clenched. He'd assumed the floor would be empty this early, that he'd have the place to himself. The realization that Elena Sterling was already here, already working while the rest of the city slept, made him want to disappear into the walls. "Just needed to reset the breaker, ma'am," he called back, keeping his voice professional and distant. "Everything should be working now. I'll just test the switches to make sure. Do it quickly. I have a press conference in 2 hours and I need to change." Marcus moved through the reception area, testing light switches as he went. Each one responded perfectly, flooding the space with warm light that made the artwork glow and the marble gleam. He was thorough but fast, wanting nothing more than to finish and escape back to the maintenance levels where executives existed only as distant voices on intercom systems. The executive suite had 3 main areas: the reception space, a large conference room, and what had to be Elena's private office. 2 of the 3 doors were open. The third, made of frosted glass that turned everything behind it into soft shadows, was closed. Marcus tested the switches outside the conference room, then moved toward the office. There was one more switch by the frosted door, a master control that probably operated the office lights. He flipped it, heard the click of response, and reached for the door handle without thinking. It was instinct, a maintenance worker's reflex. After 3 years of checking, testing, verifying, his hand was on the frosted glass, pushing it open before his brain registered what he was doing. The door swung inward. Elena Sterling stood in the center of her office, frozen in the act of pulling a fresh blouse from a garment bag. She wore a black skirt and nothing else above the waist except a bra so delicate it seemed barely there. Her mahogany hair was down, falling in waves across bare shoulders, and her dark eyes went wide with shock that matched the horror flooding through Marcus's veins. For one endless second, neither of them moved. The world compressed into that single moment, her skin pale against the dark fabric, the curve of her collarbone, the vulnerability of exposure in someone who'd built an empire on never showing weakness. Then reality crashed back in. The tool bag hit the floor with a sound like a gunshot. "I'm sorry." The words tumbled out in a desperate rush. "I'm so sorry, I was just testing the lights. I didn't know, I didn't mean to—" "Get out!" Her voice was ice over steel, quiet and absolutely lethal. "I'm sorry," Marcus said again, backing away so fast he nearly tripped over his own feet. His face burned with humiliation, his heart hammering against his ribs. "The door, I thought it was empty. I was just checking the switches. I'm so sorry." "Turn around." The command stopped him mid-retreat. Marcus spun so fast he felt dizzy, facing the frosted glass and the blurred shapes of the reception area beyond. Behind him, he heard the whisper of fabric, the sharp zip of the garment bag. Every muscle in his body was locked rigid, waiting for the explosion, the rage, the inevitable consequences of the worst mistake of his professional life. He'd walked in on Elena Sterling half-dressed, the CEO, the woman who could end his career with a single phone call, the woman who held his entire fragile existence in her perfectly manicured hands. "I swear I didn't see anything," he said to the frosted glass, his voice cracking. "I swear I was just doing my job, testing the circuits. I didn't know you were in here. Please, I have a daughter. I need this job. Be quiet." Marcus's jaw snapped shut. He could hear his own breathing, ragged and panicked, and beneath it, the soft sounds of Elena dressing. Seconds stretched into eternities. His entire body felt like a live wire, crackling with fear and shame. When she finally spoke again, her voice was controlled but carried something underneath that he couldn't quite identify. "What's your name?" "Marcus Chen, ma'am." Maintenance staff, electrical clearance. The words came out like a prisoner reciting his crimes. I've worked here 3 years. I've never had a complaint. I swear this was an accident. I thought the office was empty. I heard you the first time. A pause that felt like falling. You can turn around now. Marcus turned slowly, keeping his eyes fixed on the floor. Elena Sterling stood behind her desk, now fully dressed in a cream blouse and the same black skirt. Her hair was pulled back in the severe style he recognized from that glimpse in the lobby months ago. She looked every inch the CEO again, all traces of vulnerability erased. But her dark eyes studied him with an intensity that made his skin prickle. Look at me. It was the hardest thing Marcus had ever done. Meeting Elena Sterling's gaze felt like staring into a searchlight, but he forced himself to do it. She deserved that much, at least an acknowledgement of what he'd done and acceptance of whatever judgment she was about to deliver. Her face was unreadable, a mask of perfect control, but something flickered in her eyes as she looked at him. Not anger exactly, something more complicated. You really didn't know I was here. It wasn't a question, but Marcus answered anyway. No, ma'am, I swear. The work order just said electrical malfunction. I reset the breaker and I was testing all the switches. I thought the whole floor was empty this early. His hands were shaking. He clenched them into fists at his sides. I understand if you need to fire me. I understand I don't have any excuse. I just want you to know it was an accident. I would never. Stop talking. He stopped. Elena walked around her desk with measured steps, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. She stopped 3 feet away from him, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something subtle and expensive that made the air between them feel charged with electricity. You're terrified. It was an observation, not a question, delivered in a voice that seemed genuinely curious. Yes, ma'am. Of me, or of losing your job? Both. The truth fell out before he could stop it. Mostly of losing my job. I have a daughter. She's 6. I'm all she has. I can't. His voice cracked and he forced himself to breathe. I can't afford to lose this. Elena's expression shifted, something almost like recognition passing across her face. She studied him for another long moment, and Marcus felt like he was being catalogued, assessed, measured against some criteria he couldn't begin to understand. The door was unlocked, she said finally. I should have secured it. That's on me, not you. Marcus blinked, certain he'd heard wrong. Ma'am, you were doing your job, testing the electrical system. I was careless. She turned away, moving back to her desk with that same controlled grace. What you saw stays between us. Understood? Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. I would never say anything to anyone. I swear. Good. She picked up a tablet from her desk, her attention already shifting to whatever waited in her schedule. Finish your testing and get out. Send your supervisor a report that everything's functioning normally. Marcus stood rooted to the spot, unable to process what was happening. She wasn't firing him. She wasn't even yelling at him. He'd braced for disaster and instead found something he didn't have a name for. Ma'am. The word came out before he could stop it. I really am sorry. Elena looked up from her tablet, and for just a second her mask slipped. What he saw underneath wasn't anger or ice or any of the things he'd expected. It was exhaustion. The kind of bone-deep weariness that recognized itself in another person. I know you are, she said quietly. Now go. Marcus grabbed his tool bag and fled, his legs unsteady as he escaped from the office. He tested the remaining switches with shaking hands, documented everything on his phone, and made it to the elevator before his knees gave out. He leaned against the cool metal wall, his heart still racing, trying to understand what had just happened. She'd let him go. She'd seen his terror, heard his desperation about his daughter, and she'd chosen mercy over the punishment he deserved. Why? The question followed him all the way back to the basement, through the morning's remaining work orders, through the mechanical routine of fixing broken things while his mind spun in circles. 2 days passed. Marcus reported for his shifts, kept his head down, and tried to convince himself the incident was behind him. The executive floor might as well have been on another planet. He fixed a leaking pipe in the 4th-floor bathroom, replaced fluorescent tubes in the 2nd-floor conference room, unclogged a drain in the cafeteria. Invisible work for invisible people. Then on Thursday afternoon, his phone buzzed with a message from HR. Marcus Chen, please report to Human Resources immediately. 4th floor, Suite 400. His stomach dropped through the floor. This was it. They'd decided to fire him after all, probably wanted to do it officially with paperwork and witnesses. He should have known the reprieve was temporary. The HR suite was all neutral colors and uncomfortable furniture designed to make difficult conversations slightly less awful. The receptionist barely looked up when Marcus gave his name, just gestured toward a conference room where a woman in a gray pantsuit waited with a folder. Mr. Chen, I'm Linda Walsh, HR Director. Please sit down. Marcus sat, his hands gripping his knees. If this is about Monday morning, I can explain. This isn't disciplinary, Mr. Chen. Linda opened the folder and slid a document across the table. This is a position transfer. The words didn't make sense. Marcus stared at the paper, trying to force his brain to process what he was seeing. Effective immediately, you're being reassigned from general maintenance to direct support technician for the executive floor. It's a permanent position with a significant salary increase and enhanced benefits package. Marcus's vision blurred. The numbers on the page swam. $68,000 to $127,000, nearly double his current salary. Health insurance that covered dependents, which meant Lily's dental work, the braces she'd need next year. I don't understand. The position was created specifically based on a recommendation from Ms. Sterling herself. She indicated that the executive floor requires dedicated technical support with electrical expertise and, Linda consulted her notes, demonstrated discretion and reliability under pressure. Ms. Sterling recommended me. The words came out strangled. That's correct. The salary is detailed on page 2. You'll also receive health insurance that covers dependents, which I understand is relevant given your daughter. Linda's professional demeanor softened slightly. This is a good opportunity, Mr. Chen. The executive floor position comes with better hours, better benefits, and direct exposure to company leadership. If you perform well, it could open doors. Doors. The word felt like a foreign language. Marcus looked down at the numbers again. The salary was almost double what he currently made. The health insurance would cover Lily's dental work she needed, the checkups he'd been putting off because the co-pays added up too fast. The hours meant he could drop her off at school every morning and pick her up every afternoon. Actually see her during daylight instead of kissing her goodbye while she slept and coming home after she'd already gone to bed. It was everything he needed, everything he'd been drowning for lack of, and it came from Elena Sterling. I don't understand why, he said quietly. After what happened. Ms. Sterling's recommendations don't require explanation, Linda interrupted smoothly. Do you accept the position or not? What choice did he have? What choice had he ever had? Yes, I accept. But that evening, alone in his apartment after Lily had fallen asleep, Marcus pulled out his phone and searched through his work emails until he found something he'd noticed weeks ago and promptly forgotten. A message from David, forwarded from Sarah Mitchell, Elena's executive assistant, requesting maintenance records for all electrical work on floors 12 through 20. The timestamp was 2 weeks before the incident with the frosted door. He opened his personnel file on the company intranet, something he'd never bothered to check before. Last accessed by E. Sterling. The log showed. Date, 3 weeks ago. She'd been looking at his file before he ever walked into her office. Marcus sat back, his mind racing. The incident hadn't been the catalyst. It had been something else. Something that happened before he ever saw her half-dressed and terrified. He thought back to those weeks, trying to remember anything unusual, any interaction with executives or situations that might have drawn attention. Then it hit him. 15th floor, 2 weeks before the frosted door incident. He'd been troubleshooting a complex HVAC failure, teaching a junior technician named Martinez how to diagnose sensor feedback loops. It had taken 3 hours, and he'd explained every step, drawn diagrams, made sure the kid understood not just what to do, but why. They'd been deep in the mechanical room when Marcus had looked up and seen a figure in the hallway. Just a shadow, really, someone watching through the half-open door. He'd assumed it was building management doing rounds and hadn't given it another thought. But what if it had been her? What if Elena Sterling had been watching him work, listening to him teach, seeing something in that moment that made her pull his file and consider him for a position that didn't even exist yet? And then the incident happened, and instead of being the disaster that ended his career, it became a test he didn't know he was taking, a test of discretion under pressure, of character revealed in crisis. Marcus pulled up the acceptance email from Linda and read through the job description again. Direct support technician for the executive floor, responsible for all electrical, HVAC, and general facilities systems. Primary location, 23rd floor. Report directly to David Park, but with priority response to executive wing requests. You start Monday morning, Linda had said. Report to the executive reception desk at 7 o'clock a.m. Ms. Sterling's assistant will brief you on protocols and expectations. 3 days. He had 3 days before he stepped into a world where Elena Sterling would be a constant presence instead of a distant, terrifying legend. 3 days to figure out how to be invisible to someone who'd already seen right through him. Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. Marcus stood outside Sterling Tower at 6:45, watching his reflection waver in the glass facade. The new badge felt heavy in his pocket, a small piece of plastic that somehow represented the distance between who he'd been last week and who he was supposed to become today. He'd dropped Lily at school early, endured her questions about why he looked so nervous, promised her they'd celebrate his new position with pizza Friday night. She'd hugged him extra tight before running to join her friends, and the warmth of that small body against his chest was the only thing keeping him from turning around and walking away. The executive floor at 7 in the morning was a different world than the silent space he'd encountered during the emergency call. Now it hummed with controlled energy. Assistants arranging schedules, junior executives clutching coffee like lifelines, the soft ping of elevator arrivals delivering the day's first wave of ambition and anxiety. Marcus felt immediately out of place. A maintenance worker in navy blue surrounded by tailored suits and clicking heels. The reception desk curved along one wall like a spaceship console. All blonde wood and embedded screens. The woman behind it looked up as he approached, her smile professional but not unkind. Marcus Chen, he said, showing his new badge. I'm supposed to report here for executive support services. Yes, we've been expecting you. I'm Rachel. You'll be working primarily with me for coordination. Ms. Sterling's executive assistant, Sarah Mitchell, will brief you on protocols in a moment. She's just finishing with the morning briefing. Rachel gestured toward a seating area that looked like it belonged in an art gallery. Marcus perched on the edge of a chair that probably cost more than his monthly rent, his tool bag resting between his boots. Around him, the executive floor continued its choreographed dance. People moved with purpose, their conversations happening in low tones that suggested everything discussed was confidential and crucial. Mr. Chen. Marcus stood quickly, nearly knocking over his tool bag. The woman who'd spoken was in her mid-40s, impeccably dressed in charcoal gray, with sharp eyes that assessed him in a single glance. "I'm Sarah Mitchell, Ms. Sterling's executive assistant. Follow me, please." She moved like someone who'd learned to navigate these hallways in her sleep. Marcus followed, acutely aware of how his work boots sounded against the marble compared to her nearly silent heels. They passed through the main executive area into a corridor he recognized from his emergency call, the path to Elena's private wing. His pulse quickened despite himself. Sarah led him to a small office he hadn't noticed during his first visit, tucked discreetly near the electrical panel. It was modest by executive floor standards, but palatial compared to the basement break room where he usually left his things: a desk, comfortable chair, built-in cabinets for equipment, and a window that actually showed the city below. "This is your workspace. You'll maintain all systems on this floor with priority given to Ms. Sterling's immediate area. Response time for her requests is 10 minutes maximum. All other issues should be resolved within the hour unless they require parts or outside contractors." She handed him a tablet. "This links to the building management system. You'll receive all work orders here, along with Ms. Sterling's schedule, so you can plan maintenance around her meetings and commitments. That schedule is confidential. You don't discuss it with anyone, including other maintenance staff. Understood?" "Understood." Ms. Sterling values 3 things above all else: discretion, efficiency, and invisibility. Sarah's voice was matter-of-fact, delivering information he needed to survive. "Your work should be seamless. She shouldn't have to think about whether the lights work or the temperature is comfortable. If she notices you at all, it should be because you've solved a problem before it became her problem." The irony of being told to be invisible by the woman whose boss had personally promoted him wasn't lost on Marcus. He kept his expression neutral and nodded. "Questions?" 1,000 of them. None he could actually voice. "No, ma'am." "Good. There's a staff briefing every morning at 6:45 in the main conference room. You're expected to attend. It covers the day's schedule and any VIP visits that might affect your work. Start your systems check at 7:30. Ms. Sterling arrives between 8 and 8:30, and everything should be perfect before she walks through that door." Sarah paused, and something in her expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "Ms. Sterling doesn't make recommendations lightly, Mr. Chen. She saw something in you that made her believe you belong up here. I suggest you prove her right." Before Marcus could respond, Sarah was gone, her departure as efficient as everything else about her. He stood alone in his new office, surrounded by the trappings of a life he'd never imagined, and wondered what exactly Elena Sterling had seen. The first week passed in a blur of learning protocols and staying out of sight. Marcus memorized the building management system, familiarized himself with every circuit breaker and HVAC control, discovered that the executive floor had more technology packed into a single level than the rest of the building combined. Smart glass that adjusted for light levels, climate controls that responded to occupancy sensors, conference room systems that cost more than luxury cars. And through it all, he caught only glimpses of her. A flash of mahogany hair as she strode past, her voice carrying through a conference room door, crisp with authority. Once, he was replacing a malfunctioning light fixture in the hallway when she emerged from a meeting, and their eyes met for half a second before she looked away and continued walking. She gave no sign of recognition, no acknowledgement that he existed beyond his function as the person who kept her world running smoothly. It should have been a relief. Instead, it felt like standing in a room where all the air had been sucked out. Marcus told himself it was better this way. Professional, clean, a clear boundary between the man who fixed things and the woman who commanded empires. He was here to do a job, collect a paycheck that was transforming his daughter's life, and maintain the discretion Elena valued so highly. That moment in her office, when he'd seen vulnerability crack through her armor, was an aberration, a mistake they were both pretending had never happened. But late at night, lying awake in his apartment that suddenly felt less cramped thanks to the breathing room in his budget, Marcus couldn't stop thinking about the question that had haunted him since he signed the transfer papers. Not why she'd promoted him. He'd pieced that together from the timeline and the file access logs. She'd been watching him work, evaluating his competence, considering him for this position before the incident ever happened. The frosted door had been a test of character, and somehow he'd passed. What he couldn't figure out was the exhaustion he'd seen in her eyes when she'd said those 4 words. "I know you are." Like she'd recognized something in his desperation that resonated with her own hidden truths, some kinship between a maintenance worker drowning in single parenthood and a CEO drowning in expectations she couldn't escape. The answer came on his 8th day, in a moment that redefined everything he thought he understood. It was late afternoon, almost 6 o'clock, and the executive floor was emptying as people departed for dinner meetings or headed home to families and lives that existed beyond these walls. Marcus was in the main conference room testing a video system that had glitched during a presentation that morning. The technology was sophisticated enough that the manual read like a foreign language, but he'd spent 2 hours breaking down each component until he found the faulty HDMI processor. He was on his back under the conference table, rewiring connections, when he heard voices approaching. "I don't care what the legal team says." Elena's voice cut through the air like a blade. "We're not settling. Brian knew exactly what he was doing when he violated that non-compete." "Elena, the optics alone," a male voice, older, trying for reason. "The optics of backing down are worse. We set a precedent here. Every executive we've ever signed walks away thinking they can steal our clients and we'll just negotiate a settlement." Heels clicked closer. "Schedule the deposition. I want him on record lying about his intentions." They entered the conference room, and Marcus froze under the table. He could see expensive shoes, Elena's black heels, a man's polished Oxfords. The door closed with a soft click. "You're being unreasonably aggressive about this." The man's voice carried the weight of someone used to being obeyed. "Brian was your father's hire. Going after him publicly damages Robert's legacy." "My father's legacy is secured by the company's success, not by protecting executives who betray us." Or are you suggesting I should prioritize sentiment over strategy, Victor? "I'm suggesting you remember that some of us have been with this company since before you were born. Your father trusted Brian. Perhaps you should consider whether my judgment has increased this company's value by 42% in 2 years. My judgment acquired Techline and Meridian when everyone said we were overextending. My judgment," she stopped abruptly. "Is someone in here?" Marcus's heart stopped. He'd been so still, barely breathing, but somehow she'd sensed him. "The maintenance technician," he heard Victor say, and Marcus could hear the disdain dripping from every syllable. "Perhaps you should have him escorted out before we continue discussing confidential matters." Silence stretched for 3 beats of Marcus's racing heart. Chen, not a question. A statement. Elena knew he was there. Marcus slid out from under the table, tool bag in hand, his face burning with embarrassment and something else. The sick realization that he'd just overheard a conversation he had no business hearing. "I'm sorry. I was fixing the video system. I didn't mean to intrude on—" "Did you hear our conversation?" Victor demanded. Marcus recognized him now. Victor Donovan, one of the senior board members, silver hair and expensive suit projecting authority that expected deference. "I heard voices," Marcus said carefully, meeting Elena's eyes despite every instinct screaming at him to look away. "I didn't listen." It was a distinction without a difference, and they all knew it. Victor's expression said he expected immediate dismissal, security called, possibly legal action. But Elena just studied Marcus with that same unreadable intensity he'd seen in her office 2 weeks ago. "Finish your work," she said quietly, "then leave." "Yes, ma'am." Marcus turned back to the video system with shaking hands, hyper-aware of the conversation continuing in low tones behind him. He worked as quickly as possible, testing connections, verifying the repair. Every second felt like an eternity. When he finally packed up his tools and headed for the door, Victor was mid-sentence about shareholder concerns. Neither of them acknowledged Marcus's departure. He made it to his small office and leaned against the closed door, his pulse hammering. The smart thing would be to go home, forget what he'd heard, and never mention it to anyone. Discretion. That's what Elena valued. But the look in her eyes when she'd realized he was there, that hadn't been anger. It had been calculation, like she was testing him again, measuring him against some standard he didn't understand. Around 8 that evening, when the executive floor was dark and silent except for the glow of emergency lighting, his tablet pinged with a message. It was from Elena's private email sent directly to his work account. "Your discretion is noted and appreciated. E.S." 7 words. No explanation, no context. But Marcus stared at them until his eyes blurred, trying to decode the meaning underneath. She'd been testing him deliberately, or had she simply seized an opportunity when it presented itself? Either way, she'd watched him overhear a confidential conversation and choose silence, and she'd acknowledged it. The following week, Elena requested him by name for the first time. The work order came through his tablet at 2:37 in the afternoon. Temperature control malfunction in CEO office. Immediate response required. Marcus grabbed his equipment and made it to Elena's wing in under 8 minutes. Sarah intercepted him at the entrance, her expression tight with concern. "She's been in back-to-back video conferences for 3 hours. The AC cut out 40 minutes ago and the room's getting uncomfortable. Fix it quickly and quietly." Elena's office door was open, and he could hear her voice as he approached, still crisp and controlled despite what had to be stifling heat. "I understand your concerns about the timeline, David. What I need you to understand is that the board won't approve additional delays. We launch in 6 weeks regardless of—" Marcus slipped into the office, keeping to the perimeter, making himself as invisible as possible. The temperature was indeed uncomfortable, at least 78 degrees and climbing. Elena sat behind her massive desk, facing a wall of screens showing various video conference participants. She didn't acknowledge his presence, but he saw her shoulders relax fractionally. The thermostat was mounted behind a panel that matched the wall perfectly. Marcus opened it silently and ran diagnostics on his tablet. The problem was immediately obvious: a failed sensor sending incorrect readings to the climate control system. He had a replacement in his bag, always carried extras of the most common failure points. "We've been over this. Marketing doesn't drive the launch schedule. Product readiness does. If your team can't deliver the campaign materials by week 4, we'll find someone who can." Marcus worked in absolute silence, replacing the sensor, recalibrating the system, testing the response. Cool air began flowing through the vents within minutes. He allowed himself a glance toward Elena and found her watching him in the reflection of her darkened screens, her eyes tracking his movements even as she verbally dismantled someone's excuses. "Much better. Now that we can all think clearly again, let's discuss realistic deliverables." It wasn't about the temperature. She was talking to him, acknowledging the fix without breaking her focus on the meeting. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a recognition of competence between 2 professionals who understood their roles. He packed up his tools and left as quietly as he'd entered. 10 minutes later, another message appeared on his tablet. "Efficient work, thank you." 3 days after that, she asked for him again. A malfunctioning outlet in her private conference room, discovered 15 minutes before a meeting with potential investors. Marcus replaced the outlet in under 10 minutes while Elena reviewed presentation materials at the table, her presence a constant weight in his peripheral vision. Then again, a flickering light above her desk that she said was disrupting her focus during late-night work sessions, a coffee maker in her private kitchen that refused to function, a loose door handle that caught on her sleeve. Small things, easily fixed. But each request came directly from her, bypassing the normal work order system, and each one felt like another layer of something being built between them. Not friendship exactly, not trust, but something more complicated. Marcus began to understand the real reason she'd promoted him. It wasn't just about discretion regarding what had happened in her office. It was about reliability. Elena Sterling had built her entire life around control, and she needed someone in her immediate environment who could solve problems efficiently without requiring management or explanation. She needed someone who understood what she needed before she had to ask for it. He started anticipating issues, noticed when the temperature in her wing fluctuated and adjusted it before she felt the change, identified a pattern in the lighting system that caused a brief flicker every third day and replaced the timer module, kept spare parts for every system she used regularly stored in his office for immediate access. And slowly, incrementally, the Ice Queen began to thaw in his presence. It started with simple acknowledgments, a nod when he arrived to fix something, a quiet thank you when he left, then actual words beyond professional courtesy. "You're here early." Marcus looked up from the smoke detector he was replacing to find Elena standing in her office doorway, a tablet in one hand and coffee in the other. It was 7:15 in the morning, 30 minutes before her first scheduled meeting. "Wanted to finish before your first meeting, ma'am. Sarah mentioned you have investors at 8:30. You read the briefings." It wasn't a question, but he heard approval underneath. "Helps me plan my work around your schedule." Elena had been reviewing something on her tablet, but she looked up at that, studying him with those dark eyes that still made his pulse quicken in ways that had nothing to do with fear. "Most people on my staff do the minimum required and nothing more. Why don't you?" The question caught him off guard. Marcus secured the new smoke detector before answering, giving himself time to choose his words carefully. "I have a daughter. She deserves better than minimum effort. This job, what you did for me, giving me this position, it changed our lives. Seemed like the least I could do was earn it." Something flickered across Elena's face, too quick to identify. "Your daughter? She's 6? "Yes, ma'am. Lily." The name felt intimate somehow, personal in a way that made him hesitate. But Elena was watching him expectantly. "She's in first grade, loves art, hates math homework, wants to be a veterinarian when she grows up." "Just the two of you?" "Just us. Her mother left before she was born. It's been me and Lily against the world ever since." Elena was quiet for a moment, her expression unreadable. "That must be difficult." "It's everything." Then, because she'd opened the door, "What about you? Is there—" He stopped, realizing too late he was crossing a line. But Elena smiled, a small, sad curve of her lips that transformed her face for just a second. "No one. Building an empire doesn't leave much time for personal entanglements, and most people want something from me. Power, connections, proximity to success. It becomes difficult to know what's real." The honesty in her voice startled him. This was vulnerability, genuine and offered freely, and Marcus didn't know what to do with it. "I can't imagine what that's like, not trusting people's intentions." "Can't you?" Elena's eyes held his. "You trusted your daughter's mother. She left. Now you raise Lily alone, working yourself to exhaustion to provide for her. I'd imagine trust is complicated for you, too." She was right. The recognition settled between them, an understanding that neither of them had expected to find here in her office at 7:15 in the morning while he stood on a ladder replacing a smoke detector. "I should finish this." His voice came out rougher than intended. "Yes." But she didn't leave. She stayed there, working on her tablet while he completed the installation. and her presence felt less like surveillance and more like companionship. When he climbed down and packed his tools, she looked up one more time. "Thank you, Marcus." It was the first time she'd used his first name. The sound of it in her voice rewired something in his brain, created a connection he wasn't sure he wanted, and definitely didn't know how to handle. "Any time, Ms. Sterling." He left before he could say something stupid, but he felt her watching him all the way to the door. The day everything changed started ordinarily enough. Marcus arrived at 6:30 for the morning briefing, coffee in hand, prepared for another day of invisible efficiency. Sarah ran through the schedule with her usual precision: video conferences, department reviews, a site visit from a tech journalist, and an all-hands presentation at 4 in the main auditorium. The presentation is particularly important. Ms. Sterling will announce the new product line. There will be press, investors, and all senior staff. Everything needs to be perfect. Marcus made notes on his tablet. The auditorium was technically outside his jurisdiction, but he coordinated with the facilities team to ensure all executive floor systems would be stable during the event. Elena would be under intense scrutiny, and the last thing she needed was a technical failure making her look unprepared. The morning proceeded smoothly. He handled routine maintenance, responded to a minor printer malfunction in the finance director's office, replaced a burned-out LED in one of the conference rooms. Around 2, he decided to check the auditorium personally, just to verify everything the facilities team had reported. The main auditorium seated 300 people and featured a stage with professional lighting, video screens, and sound systems sophisticated enough for concert venues. The facilities team had done good work. Everything looked pristine, the technology tested and ready. Marcus was about to leave when something made him look up at the lighting rig. Years of maintenance work had trained his eyes to spot things that weren't quite right, subtle misalignments that suggested potential problems. One of the stage lights looked off-center, its mounting brackets slightly twisted. He found a ladder and climbed up to inspect it. What he discovered made his blood run cold. The safety cable, the backup that prevented lights from falling if the main mount failed, was frayed nearly through, not from age or wear, but from what looked like deliberate cutting. Someone had sawed through most of the cable, leaving just enough intact that it wouldn't be immediately obvious, but would fail under the right stress. And the main mounting bolt was loose, turned back several threads, held in place by friction alone. Marcus's hand shook as he examined the setup. This wasn't accident or neglect. This was sabotage. The light weighed at least 40 pounds. If it fell during the presentation directly onto the stage where Elena would be standing, he didn't let himself finish the thought. Working quickly, he secured the mounting bolt properly, tested the weight distribution, and replaced the safety cable entirely. Then he checked every other light in the rig, found 2 more with loosened bolts, secured them all. By the time he finished, he'd been in the auditorium for 90 minutes, and his shirt was soaked with sweat. The question burning in his mind was whether to report this, tell Sarah, security, someone. If this was deliberate sabotage, there were protocols, investigations, potential danger to Elena that extended beyond a rigged light fixture. But he had no proof beyond his professional judgment. The frayed cable could theoretically be explained as wear. The loose bolts might be attributed to poor maintenance. And if he was wrong, if he raised alarms that led nowhere, he'd look paranoid or attention-seeking. Worse, he'd put himself directly in Elena's line of sight in a way that violated everything she valued about him. She needed him to be invisible, to solve problems quietly, not to create drama. Marcus made his decision. He documented everything with photos on his tablet, secured the systems, and made a note to check them again before the presentation. Then he went back to the executive floor and tried to act like his heart wasn't racing. At 3:30, Sarah sent a message asking him to verify the video feeds in the auditorium one final time. Marcus went back down, checked the lights again, still secure, and confirmed all systems were operational. People were already filling the seats, press photographers setting up cameras. The energy in the room built like a gathering storm. Elena arrived at 3:55, flanked by Sarah and two senior executives. She wore a deep blue suit that commanded attention, her hair pulled back severely, her expression calm and confident. Marcus watched from the shadows at the back of the auditorium as she took the stage, tested the microphone, and surveyed the crowd with the control of someone who owned every room she entered. Their eyes met across the distance. Elena's gaze held his for just a moment, something passing between them that might have been acknowledgement or might have been his imagination. Then she turned her attention to her notes, and Marcus forced himself to breathe. The presentation began. Elena spoke with the kind of authority that made people lean forward, her voice carrying perfectly through the sound system. She outlined the new product line with precision, fielded questions from journalists with sharp intelligence, commanded the stage like she'd been born to it. Marcus stood near the lighting controls, watching not the presentation, but the equipment. The stage lights held steady. The video screens displayed perfectly. Everything was working exactly as it should. He started to relax. Maybe he'd been wrong. Maybe the damage he'd found was just neglect after all. Coincidence and poor maintenance rather than malicious intent. Then the light directly above center stage shifted. It was subtle, a slight rotation on its mount, but Marcus saw it immediately. His blood turned to ice. Someone was in the lighting catwalk above the stage. He could see movement in the shadows, a figure adjusting something he couldn't quite make out. Marcus moved before thinking, racing toward the stage access stairs. He had to get up there, had to stop whatever was happening. But the stairs were on the opposite side of the auditorium, and Elena was directly under that light, still speaking, unaware of the danger gathering above her. The light shifted again, rotated further. The sabotaged mount he'd fixed was holding, but now someone was actively working to override the safety measures. Marcus abandoned stealth and ran, his boots pounding against the auditorium floor, drawing attention from the crowd. He saw security guards starting to move, confused by the commotion. Saw Sarah's startled face. Saw Elena pause mid-sentence, her eyes finding him in the crowd. "Get away from center stage," Marcus shouted, his voice carrying in the sudden silence. "Now!" Elena froze. Years of control kept her rooted to the spot, confusion and authority warring on her face. The light above her groaned, metal straining against compromised connections. Marcus didn't have time to explain. He launched himself onto the stage, grabbed Elena around the waist, and threw both of them sideways with every ounce of strength he possessed. They hit the stage floor hard, Marcus twisting to take the impact on his shoulder. Half a second later, 40 pounds of metal and glass crashed into the exact spot where Elena had been standing, the mounting bracket finally giving way. The light exploded on impact with a sound like a gunshot. Shattered glass sprayed across the stage. Sparks flew from severed electrical connections. The crowd erupted in chaos, screaming, people running, security converging from all directions. But Marcus only registered Elena in his arms, her body pressed against his, her heart hammering so hard he could feel it through their clothes. Her dark eyes were wide with shock, her perfect composure shattered, and she was shaking. "Are you hurt?" Marcus demanded, his hands moving over her shoulders, her arms checking for injuries. "Did the glass hit you?" "I'm fine." Elena's voice trembled despite the words. "You? How did you know?" "I'll explain later. Right now we need to—" Security surrounded them, pulling them apart, voices shouting questions and orders. Marcus caught a glimpse of figures fleeing from the catwalk access, saw guards racing after them. Sarah was there suddenly, her professional mask cracked with genuine terror, helping Elena to her feet. "I'm fine," Elena said again, louder now, authority returning to her voice even as her hands shook. Everyone calm down. Clear the auditorium in an orderly fashion. Sarah, get security to... On it! Sarah was already coordinating on her phone. Elena's eyes found Marcus again. He was still on the stage floor, his shoulders screaming where he'd absorbed their combined impact, glass scattered around him like diamonds, blood running from a cut on his arm where a shard had caught him. "You're bleeding." "It's nothing." "It's not nothing." She moved toward him, but Sarah intercepted her gently. "We need to get you to a secure location until security sweeps the building. Please, Elena." For a moment, Marcus thought Elena would refuse, but she let Sarah guide her toward the exit, looking back at him one last time with an expression he couldn't read. Shock, gratitude, something deeper that made his breath catch. Then she was gone, and Marcus was surrounded by security personnel asking questions. He barely heard, his mind replaying those seconds on a loop, the weight of Elena in his arms, the terror in her eyes, the absolute certainty that if he'd been 1 second slower, she would have died. And somewhere in the chaos, Marcus realized that invisible was no longer an option. He'd thrown himself into the spotlight to save her, and nothing between them would ever be the same. The security office on the second floor became command central within minutes of the auditorium evacuation. Marcus sat in a hard plastic chair while a paramedic cleaned the gash on his forearm, the sting of antiseptic barely registering against the adrenaline still flooding his system. Around him, guards spoke in clipped tones into radios, coordinating a building-wide lockdown while reviewing security footage on a wall of monitors. "You're lucky. Another inch and this would have needed stitches." Marcus didn't feel lucky. He felt like his entire body was vibrating at a frequency just below visible, his mind replaying those seconds on the stage over and over. The groan of metal, Elena's body against his, the explosion of glass where she'd been standing. "Mr. Chen." The head of security, Thomas Reed, a former police detective with gray-streaked hair and eyes that had seen too many crimes to be shocked by much, pulled up a chair, his expression grave. "Walk me through what happened. Start with why you were checking the auditorium in the first place." Marcus explained about the morning briefing, his decision to personally verify the systems, finding the frayed safety cable and loose mounting bolts. He showed Reed the photos on his tablet, time-stamped from hours before the presentation. "You fixed it, secured everything properly. So how did the light still fall?" "Someone was up in the catwalk during the presentation. I saw movement, saw them working on something. They must have loosened it again or found another way to compromise the mount." Reed's jaw tightened. "Did you see a face? Any identifying features?" "No, just a silhouette. Dark clothes, moving fast." "And you didn't report the initial sabotage?" The question carried weight, not quite accusation, but close. "I considered it, but I had no proof it was deliberate. Could have been negligent maintenance. I documented everything, fixed the immediate danger, and planned to monitor it. I didn't expect someone to actively interfere during the event itself." Reed studied him for a long moment. "Your quick thinking saved Ms. Sterling's life. I want to be clear about that. But this situation is now a criminal investigation. Attempted murder, possibly corporate espionage. You'll need to make a formal statement." "Whatever you need." The door opened and Sarah appeared, her usual composure restored, but strain visible around her eyes. "Mr. Chen, Ms. Sterling wants to see you now." Reed nodded. "We'll continue this shortly. Don't leave the building." Marcus followed Sarah through corridors now patrolled by additional security, past employees gathered in worried clusters, to the executive floor. The atmosphere up here was tense, assistants speaking in hushed voices, senior executives behind closed door. Sarah led him not to Elena's office, but to a smaller conference room he'd never entered before. Elena stood at the window, her back to the door, still in the blue suit, but with her hair down now, falling in waves across her shoulders. She didn't turn when they entered. "Leave us." Sarah hesitated. "Elena, security protocols suggest—" I'm safe with Marcus." Elena's voice was soft but absolute. "Leave us, Sarah." The door closed with a click that seemed too loud in the silence. Marcus stood just inside the room, unsure whether to speak or wait, his heart hammering against his ribs. The cut on his arm throbbed in time with his pulse. "You tackled me," Elena said finally, still facing the window. "In front of 300 people, you grabbed me and threw us both to the ground." "I'm sorry, I didn't have time to—" "Don't apologize." She turned, and the expression on her face stopped his words. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her carefully maintained mask completely gone. This wasn't the Ice Queen, wasn't the CEO who commanded boardrooms and dismantled competitors. This was a woman confronting her own mortality, stripped of every defense. "You saved my life. Do you understand that? If you hadn't been there, if you hadn't seen that light shifting, I would be dead right now." The rawness in her voice hit him like a physical blow. "I saw the sabotage this afternoon. The frayed cable, the loose bolts. I fixed it, but I should have reported it immediately. Should have insisted they cancel the presentation until you did exactly what you should have done." Elena crossed the room, stopping 3 feet from him, close enough that he could see she was still trembling. "You identified a threat, neutralized it, and stayed vigilant. When the danger evolved, you acted without hesitation. That's not something to apologize for." "I'm just a maintenance tech. I fix broken things. I'm not—" "You're the man who saved my life." Elena's eyes held his with an intensity that made breathing difficult. "Don't tell me what you are or aren't, Marcus Chen. I know exactly what you are." The way she said his name rewired something fundamental in his chest. Marcus found himself taking a step closer, drawn by gravity he didn't understand. What happened up there on that stage, that wasn't about maintaining your image or protecting the company. That was about you. Just you. And I would do it again without thinking twice. Elena's breath caught. For a moment, Marcus thought she might say something that would change everything between them. But then her phone buzzed, shattering the moment, and she looked away. Security found evidence in the catwalk, tools, cut cables. They're reviewing all footage from the building. Whoever did this will be caught. Her voice was steadier now, rebuilding her composure piece by piece. "Do you know why someone would target you like this?" A bitter smile crossed Elena's face. "I'm a young woman running a multi-billion-dollar company in an industry dominated by men who think they deserve what I have. I've made enemies, acquiring competitors, refusing partnerships, choosing merit over politics. The list of people who'd benefit from my death is longer than I'd like to admit." The casual way she said it, "people who'd benefit from my death," made Marcus's hands curl into fists. That's not normal. That's not acceptable. It's reality. And now I have to decide how to handle it. Cancel the product launch, increase security, show weakness to everyone watching for me to fail. You show strength by staying alive. Everything else is secondary." Elena looked at him with something that might have been wonder. "You really believe that?" "I know what it's like to have someone depending on you. To know that your choices, your survival, determines their entire world." Marcus thought of Lily, probably finishing her homework right now at Margaret's apartment, unaware of how close she'd come to losing him today. You have thousands of employees whose livelihoods depend on this company. You owe it to them to protect yourself. Is that the only reason? The employees? The question hung between them, heavy with implications Marcus wasn't ready to examine. Before he could answer, the door opened and Reed appeared with 2 other security personnel. "Ms. Sterling, we have a situation. We've identified the individual in the catwalk." Elena's spine straightened, authority flooding back into her posture. "Show me." They moved to a larger conference room where security had set up a command center. On the main screen, frozen footage showed a man in dark maintenance coveralls accessing the catwalk 20 minutes before the presentation. The image quality was good enough to see his face clearly, mid-40s, sharp features, the kind of face that blended into corporate environments without raising questions. "His name is Michael Barnes," Reed announced, pulling up additional files. "He's been with building maintenance for 8 months. Background check was clean, references verified. We just discovered his employment application used a false social security number." "Someone planted him." Elena's voice was tight, controlled fury barely contained beneath the surface. "That's our assessment. We're searching his locker and contacting authorities now, but there's more." Reed pulled up another image, a screenshot of an email from an anonymous account. "This was sent to 3 business journalists 40 minutes ago before the incident. It claims you've been cooking the books, inflating revenue numbers to boost stock prices. The timing suggests whoever sent it expected you to be in no position to defend yourself." Marcus felt sick. This wasn't just an assassination attempt, it was coordinated destruction. Kill Elena, release damaging accusations, tank the company's value, all at once. Someone had planned this with precision that spoke to resources and inside knowledge. "The allegations are false," Elena stated flatly. "Our books are audited quarterly by independent firms, but proving that will take time, and the accusation alone will damage investor confidence. Not if you're standing in front of cameras tomorrow, very much alive, with security footage showing an attempted murder that coincides with fraudulent allegations," Reed countered. "That's not whistleblowing, that's conspiracy. We need to find Barnes before he disappears, and I want to know who hired him." "Someone with resources," Elena's voice was ice. "Someone who understands this company well enough to coordinate this kind of attack. We're on it. In the meantime, I'm assigning personal security. You don't go anywhere without—" "No!" Elena's voice cut like steel. "I'm not hiding behind bodyguards like I'm afraid. We handle this intelligently, but I won't give anyone the satisfaction of seeing me cower." Reed looked like he wanted to argue, but knew better. "At minimum, you need someone watching your immediate environment. Someone you trust." Elena's eyes found Marcus across the room. Something passed between them, a silent conversation that excluded everyone else. "Marcus stays close. He's already proven he can identify threats I can't see. He works on the executive floor anyway. Nothing changes visibly, but he's there. Ms. Sterling, with respect, Mr. Chen is maintenance staff, not security personnel," Reed pointed out carefully. "Mr. Chen saved my life while your security personnel were watching cameras and patrolling hallways. I trust his instincts. He stays." Reed nodded reluctantly. "We'll need to brief him on protocols, provide communication equipment." "Fine. Do it now. I want this handled tonight." Elena turned to Marcus, her expression unreadable. "Unless you have objections to expanding your responsibilities?" Marcus thought about what he was being asked. Thought about Lily, about the risk of putting himself between Elena and whoever wanted her dead. Thought about walking away, choosing safety, protecting the fragile stability they'd finally achieved. But when he looked at Elena, really looked at her, he saw the vulnerability she was hiding behind steel and authority. Saw someone who'd built walls so high she couldn't see over them anymore, who trusted so few people that asking him to stay close was an act of profound faith. "No objections. Whatever you need." The relief that flashed across Elena's face was so brief he almost missed it, but it had been there, real and raw, before she locked it away again. The next 3 hours were a blur of security briefings, equipment distribution, and coordination with law enforcement. Marcus was fitted with a discreet earpiece that connected him to the security network, shown emergency protocols, given access codes for systems he'd never imagined needing. Reed ran him through threat assessment basics, what to watch for, how to respond. "Your job isn't to engage threats. It's to get Ms. Sterling to safety and alert us. You see something suspicious, you call it in. Understand?" "Understood." Though privately, Marcus wondered what he'd actually do if someone threatened Elena in his presence. The tackle on stage had been pure instinct, and he suspected his instincts wouldn't wait for security protocols. It was nearly 11 when he finally made it home. Margaret had put Lily to bed hours ago, leaving a note about the math homework Lily had struggled with and the chicken soup she'd left in the fridge. Marcus stood in his daughter's doorway, watching her sleep, and felt the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on him. He'd crossed so many lines today: professional boundaries, class divisions, the careful distance he'd maintained between himself and the world Elena inhabited. And tomorrow he'd cross more, standing close to her, not as invisible maintenance staff, but as something else entirely. His phone buzzed, a message from Elena's private number sent to his personal cell. "Thank you for today, for everything. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be complicated." Marcus stared at those words until his eyes blurred. She had his personal number, had reached out after hours, had thanked him like a person rather than an employee. The intimacy of it terrified and thrilled him in equal measure. He typed back carefully, "You're welcome. See you at 7. Her response came immediately. 6:30. "We have work to do before the day starts." Marcus smiled, despite everything. Of course she did. The next morning arrived with news that Michael Barnes had been apprehended trying to board a flight to Mexico. His apartment had yielded a burner phone with messages coordinating the attack, along with $50,000 in cash. He was in custody, not talking, but law enforcement was confident they could trace the money. Marcus arrived at the executive floor at 6:15 to find it already buzzing with activity. Sarah intercepted him immediately, her expression complex, mixing professional courtesy with something that might have been concern. "Ms. Sterling is in her office. She asked for you directly." Sarah's tone carried a warning Marcus couldn't quite decode. "Whatever's happening between you two, be careful. She's under enormous pressure right now, and she makes decisions based on control and strategy. Don't mistake proximity for something it isn't." The warning was clear and probably wise. Marcus nodded his understanding and knocked on Elena's office door. "Come in." She sat behind her desk, already dressed for battle in a charcoal suit, her hair pulled back severely, but her eyes were softer when she looked at him, carrying memories of yesterday's vulnerability. "How's your arm?" "Fine. Barely feel it." Marcus closed the door behind him. "You look like you didn't sleep." "I didn't." Elena gestured to the chair across from her desk. "I spent the night reviewing everyone who might have orchestrated this. Business rivals, disgruntled former employees, board members who opposed my leadership. The list is extensive and depressing. Reed will find this connection. The money trail always leads somewhere. That's not what worries me." Elena leaned back, studying him with an intensity that made the air feel charged. "What worries me is that I've built my entire life around not needing anyone. Control, independence, self-reliance. And yesterday, I needed you. Absolutely, completely needed you to save my life. That's not a position I'm comfortable occupying." The honesty stunned him. Marcus chose his next words carefully. "Needing someone in a crisis doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. I'm not sure I'm allowed to be human. Not in this position. Weakness is blood in the water. Every competitor, every skeptical board member, every journalist looking for a story, they're all waiting for me to prove I don't belong here. So prove them wrong. Show up today stronger than yesterday. Face the cameras. Address the allegations. Demonstrate that whoever tried to kill you failed spectacularly. That's not weakness. That's power." Elena's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You make it sound simple." "I didn't say it was simple. I said it was necessary." Marcus leaned forward, holding her gaze. "You asked me yesterday what you are to me. You want the truth? You're the person who changed my daughter's life by giving me a chance I didn't deserve. You're the woman who works 18-hour days to protect thousands of employees she'll never meet. And you're someone who shouldn't have to face death threats and character assassination alone. The silence that followed felt alive, charged with everything they weren't saying. Elena's eyes searched his face like she was looking for proof he meant it, that this wasn't performance or manipulation. I don't know how to do this, how to let someone be close without wondering what they want from me. I don't want anything except for you to be safe. That's it. That's all of it. That might be the most valuable thing anyone's ever offered me. Elena visibly gathered herself, straightening in her chair. Today's agenda is brutal. Press conference at 9 o'clock addressing yesterday's incident and the false allegations. Board meeting at 11 where I'll need to reassure everyone the company is stable. Investor calls this afternoon. I need you close for all of it. I'll be there. The press conference was held in the main lobby, cameras and journalists packed into every available space. Marcus stood off to the side, watching Elena command the room with absolute authority. She addressed the assassination attempt directly, framed it as corporate sabotage coordinated with false financial allegations, and presented security footage that made the conspiracy impossible to deny. Someone wanted to destroy this company by destroying me. They failed. Sterling Technologies stands stronger today than yesterday, and we will not be intimidated by criminals and cowards. The journalists erupted with questions. Elena fielded them with sharp intelligence, never defensive, always in control. And twice during the conference, her eyes found Marcus in the crowd, drawing strength from his presence. When it ended, Sarah intercepted them before they could return to the executive floor. The board wants to meet immediately. Victor Donovan is insisting on a vote of confidence. Elena's expression hardened. Of course he is. Let's not keep them waiting. The boardroom was on the 62nd floor, all glass walls and panoramic city views designed to remind everyone inside that they operated at the pinnacle of power. 12 board members sat around a massive table, their expressions ranging from supportive to hostile. Victor Donovan occupied the chair directly opposite the head of the table where Elena would sit, his silver hair and expensive suit projecting authority, his eyes gleaming with something that looked like satisfaction. Elena, glad you could join us. We've been discussing yesterday's unfortunate incident. Unfortunate is an interesting word for attempted murder, Victor. Elena took her seat. Marcus positioned himself near the door, unobtrusive but present. Quite right, which is why we need to discuss your security protocols, your decision-making process, and whether the company's interests are best served by maintaining current leadership during this crisis. So, there it was. Not concern for Elena's safety, but an opportunity to challenge her position. Marcus's hands clenched at his sides. My security protocols are being enhanced. The individual responsible is in custody. Law enforcement is tracking the conspiracy's origins, and the false financial allegations have been thoroughly debunked by our auditors. What exactly is your concern, Victor? My concern is that someone wanted you dead badly enough to plan an operative in this building for 8 months. That suggests enemies powerful enough to threaten this company's stability. Perhaps it's time to consider whether your leadership style has created untenable risks. My leadership style doubled our value in 2 years. What you're actually suggesting is that I made you all significantly wealthier, and now you're wondering if someone more pliable might be easier to control. That's not what I'm saying. It's exactly what you're saying. Elena leaned forward, her eyes locked on Victor. You've opposed every major decision I've made. The Techline acquisition you said would bankrupt us generated $30 million in revenue last quarter. The restructuring you called reckless improved operational efficiency by 18%. You don't question my competence, Victor. You question my right to have it. The room fell silent. Other board members shifted uncomfortably, some nodding slightly, others maintaining careful neutrality. "I move that we table this discussion." Helen Chang, one of the older board members, spoke up. "Elena has handled this crisis with exactly the leadership we hired her to provide. The threats against her are proof of her effectiveness, not evidence of failure." "Seconded," added Daniel Brooks, a venture capitalist who'd backed Elena's early initiatives. Victor's jaw tightened. "Fine, but I want regular updates on the investigation, and I want enhanced security measures that don't rely on—" His eyes flicked dismissively toward Marcus. "Maintenance staff playing hero." "Noted." Elena's voice was cold enough to frost glass. "Anything else?" The meeting continued for another hour, reviewing financial projections and operational updates, but the tension never fully dissipated. Marcus watched Victor throughout, noting how the older man's eyes kept returning to Elena with something that went beyond professional rivalry. This was personal and dangerous. When they finally escaped back to the executive floor, Elena's composure cracked the moment her office door closed. She leaned against her desk, exhaling slowly, the weight of maintaining perfection visibly crushing down on her shoulders. He's going to keep pushing. Every crisis, every setback, he'll use it to question my leadership. Then don't give him setbacks. Keep doing exactly what you've been doing. Succeed so loudly he can't make himself heard. Marcus crossed the office slowly, aware he was entering territory they'd both avoided. How do you do that? Do what? Make it sound possible. Make me believe I can actually survive this. Because I've watched you for weeks now. I've seen how hard you work, how much you care about getting things right. You're not just competent, Elena. You're extraordinary. And anyone who can't see that is deliberately closing their eyes. Marcus, her voice caught on his name. Someone tried to kill you yesterday. And today you stood in front of cameras and the board and everyone watching for you to break. And you didn't. You're still standing, still fighting. That's not something that needs my belief to make it real. It already is. Elena stood there, 3 feet away from him, and for the first time since he'd known her, she looked uncertain, vulnerable in a way that had nothing to do with physical danger and everything to do with the space between them that kept shrinking. You scare me. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I scare you? You see me. Not the CEO, not the Ice Queen, not the legacy or the empire. Just me. And I don't know what to do with that. Marcus's heart hammered against his ribs. You don't have to do anything with it. I'm not asking for anything, Elena. I'm here. That's all. That's not all. That's everything. The confession hung in the air between them, heavy with implications that neither of them could afford to pursue. Marcus knew they were standing on the edge of something that would change everything. Destroy every professional boundary, compromise every carefully maintained distance. But before either of them could move forward or back, the door burst open and Sarah rushed in, her face pale. We have a problem. The investigators found something in Barnes's phone records. The person who hired him, it's someone inside the company. The words hit like a physical blow. Elena's face went white, then flushed with rage so pure it seemed to heat the air around her. Who? Sarah hesitated, her eyes flicking to Marcus before settling back on Elena. The investigators want to brief you directly. They're on their way up now with Detective Parker from the police department. But Elena, they said the evidence is conclusive. It goes high. I don't care about conclusive. I want a name. They wouldn't give it to me over the phone, said it was too sensitive. Sarah's hands twisted together, a rare show of anxiety. But they mentioned it goes high. Someone with access to executive systems and confidential information. Marcus felt ice spread through his chest. High level meant board members, senior executives, people who'd been with the company for years. People Elena had trusted, worked alongside. perhaps even considered allies in the constant battle to prove herself worthy of her father's legacy. Clear my schedule for the next 2 hours. I want Reed, the investigators, and Detective Parker in the main conference room. No one else. And Sarah, I need you to pull personnel files for everyone at director level and above. Access logs for the last year, financial records, anything that might show connections to Barnes or unusual activity. On it. Sarah disappeared, her heels clicking rapidly down the hallway. Elena stood motionless for a moment, her back to Marcus, her shoulders rigid with tension. When she finally turned, her expression was pure steel. All traces of the vulnerability from moments before locked away behind walls he suspected were even thicker now. This doesn't leave this room, not even to security staff you might trust. Until we know who we're dealing with, everyone is suspect. Understood. But Elena, you need to consider that whoever this is, they're desperate enough to kill you. If they suspect they've been discovered, they'll do what? Try again? Let them try. I'm not hiding and I'm not running. Not from corporate sabotage and certainly not from traitors in my own company. I'm not suggesting you hide. I'm suggesting you be smart about this. Marcus moved closer, lowering his voice even though they were alone. Someone inside had access to your schedule, knew exactly where you'd be standing on that stage, had months to plan this. They're not going to confess and walk away quietly, which is why we're going to be very careful about how we handle the reveal. Elena's eyes held his, and he saw the strategist beneath the rage. Once we have the name, we control the information. Use it to set a trap, gather evidence that's airtight, make sure when we move against them there's no possibility of escape or legal maneuvering. You've done this before. Not murder conspiracies, but corporate warfare. Yes. Elena moved to the window, looking out over the city she'd claimed as her territory. You don't get to where I am without learning how to identify enemies and neutralize them. I just never expected the enemy to be this close. The pain in her voice was carefully controlled but audible. Marcus understood then that this betrayal cut deeper than professional rivalry or business competition. Elena had built her life around not trusting people, and now someone had proven every cynical instinct right. Not everyone is your enemy. She looked at him, something flickering in her eyes. No? I'm not. The words hung between them, simple and absolute. Elena studied his face like she was searching for cracks in the foundation, testing the weight his promise could bear. I know. She said it so softly he almost missed it. The intercom on her desk buzzed. Ms. Sterling, Detective Parker and the investigative team are here. Send them to conference room A. We'll be there in 2 minutes. Elena straightened her suit jacket, smoothed her hair, rebuilt her armor piece by piece until the vulnerable woman who'd confessed that Marcus saw her was completely hidden. But just before she headed for the door, she paused and looked back at him. Stay close. I need... She stopped, seeming to reconsider her words. I need to know you're there. I'm not going anywhere. Conference room A was the largest on the executive floor, designed for board meetings and high-stakes negotiations. Detective Parker was a woman in her 50s with gray-streaked hair and eyes that had seen too many crimes to be shocked by much. She stood beside Reed and 2 other investigators Marcus didn't recognize, all of them looking grim. Ms. Sterling, thank you for meeting on short notice. I understand this is difficult, but the evidence we've uncovered requires immediate action. Show me. Parker pulled up images on the main screen, phone records, financial transactions, email metadata. Michael Barnes received his instructions through an encrypted messaging app, but we were able to trace the account through payment records. The person who hired him made 3 transfers totaling $50,000 over the past 6 months. The money came from an offshore account, but the setup was sloppy. They thought they'd hidden their tracks, but forensic accounting found the source. Who? Elena's voice was flat, controlled, betraying nothing. Parker glanced at Reed, then back to Elena. The account was funded by liquidating stock options belonging to Brian Foster, your chief technology officer. The name landed like a grenade. Marcus saw Elena's expression freeze, shock warring with disbelief. Brian Foster had been with Sterling Technologies for 10 years, had worked directly with Robert Sterling, was responsible for the technological innovations that had made the company's recent expansion possible. That's not possible. He's been loyal to this company since before I took over. He supported every initiative, worked 18-hour days on the new product line. Why would he? We believe he's working with outside interests, Parker interrupted gently. The financial trail shows he's in debt, significant gambling losses over the past 2 years, roughly $180,000. Someone approached him, offered to clear his debts in exchange for cooperation. The plan was to eliminate you, install more pliable leadership, and Brian would maintain his position while feeding information to competitors. Elena sat back, her face pale. Brian came to my father's funeral, told me he believed in my vision for the company, has sat in meetings with me almost daily for 2 years, and all that time he was planning to kill me. We've been watching him since we identified the connection an hour ago. He's in his office right now, acting like everything is normal. We need your authorization to arrest him. Not yet. Parker frowned. Ms. Sterling, he's a flight risk. If he suspects we're onto him, he doesn't suspect. If he did, he'd already be gone. Elena's mind was clearly racing, strategizing even through the shock. Brian is smart, careful. He's been planning this for months, maybe years, which means there's more people involved, more evidence to gather. If we arrest him now, we lose the chance to see the full picture. You want to use him? Parker's tone carried understanding. I want to finish this. Not just stop one attack, but dismantle the entire conspiracy. Brian had help. Someone on the outside funding this, coordinating it. I want them too. Reed leaned forward. That's dangerous, Ms. Sterling. Every day Brian walks free is another day he could try something else. Not if he thinks he's still hidden. Not if we feed him information that makes him believe his plan is still viable. Marcus watched her work, saw the strategic mind that had built an empire operating at full capacity. But he also saw the cost, the way her hands trembled slightly before she clasped them together, the tension in her jaw that spoke of betrayal cutting deep. What do you propose? We tell Brian that the investigation into Barnes is stalling, that the money trail went cold at the offshore account, that I'm focused on external threats and increasing public security, leaving internal systems vulnerable. We give him rope to hang himself with, and we watch everything he does, everyone he contacts. That puts you at significant risk. If he feels threatened, if he suspects at all, I'll have protection. Elena's eyes flicked to Marcus. And I'll be careful. But I won't let whoever orchestrated this walk away because we moved too fast. The detective studied Elena for a long moment, then nodded slowly. 48 hours. We'll monitor Brian around the clock, track every communication, every movement, but if he makes any move that suggests immediate danger, we shut it down. Agreed. The next 2 days were the longest of Marcus's life. He stayed within 10 feet of Elena at all times, shadowing her through meetings and video conferences, standing outside her office when she needed privacy, eating meals he barely tasted, while watching everyone who came near her with suspicion that bordered on paranoia. Brian Foster appeared at staff meetings looking concerned and supportive, asking Elena how she was handling the stress, offering to take on additional responsibilities. Marcus watched him perform empathy and concern, and every word felt like acid burning through his resolve not to grab the man by his expensive collar and throw him against the nearest wall. How are you holding up? Brian asked Elena after a product development meeting, his voice warm with false concern. I'm fine, Brian. Thank you for asking. Your work on the new interface is excellent, by the way. Exactly what we need for launch. Just doing my job. We all want to see you succeed. The lie was so smooth, so practiced, that Marcus had to fight the urge to intervene. But Elena's hand touched his arm briefly as she passed, a silent reminder to stay calm, stay focused. Surveillance teams reported that Brian was making encrypted calls to an unknown number, always from locations outside the building where he thought he had privacy. The technical team was working to break the encryption, but it was sophisticated, suggesting whoever Brian reported to he had significant resources. On the second night, around 11, Marcus was doing a final security sweep of the executive floor when his earpiece crackled to life. "We've got movement. Brian just entered the building through the parking garage. He's not supposed to be here." Reed's voice was urgent. "Where's Ms. Sterling?" "Still in her office. We've got eyes on her, but Brian's heading for the executive floor now. Get to her." Marcus ran, his boots pounding against marble as he raced down the corridor. Behind him, he heard elevator doors opening, footsteps echoing through the empty building. He burst into Elena's wing to find her at her desk, paperwork spread around her, completely unaware of the danger approaching. "We need to go now." Elena looked up instantly, reading the tension in his voice. "Brian?" "In the building, coming up. Reed's mobilizing security, but—" The lights went out. Complete darkness swallowed the executive floor, emergency lighting failing to activate. Marcus heard Elena's sharp intake of breath, heard movement in the hallway outside, and every instinct screamed danger. "Stay behind me." He pulled Elena away from the desk, his eyes adjusting to the darkness. He could see the outline of her office door, the windows showing city lights beyond. "He's cutting power, disabling security systems. Where's your panic button?" "Desk drawer. But if the power's out—" Footsteps in the hallway, slow and deliberate, someone who knew exactly where they were going. "Elena." Brian's voice called from the darkness, friendly and calm. "Are you still here? The power went out. I came to make sure you were okay." The performance was chilling in its normalcy. Marcus felt Elena tense against his back, heard her breathing quicken. "I'm fine, Brian. Just finishing some work. The emergency lighting should kick in any moment." "Actually, it won't." Brian appeared in the doorway, backlit by emergency exits in the hallway beyond. Marcus couldn't see his face clearly, but he could see the gun in Brian's hand, dark and deadly against the faint light. "I made sure of that. Had months to prepare, to understand every system in this building. You made it easy, really, trusting me with so much access." "Brian, what are you doing?" Elena's voice carried just the right note of confusion, still playing her part even with a gun pointed at her. "What I should have done 2 years ago when they first approached me. You were never supposed to run this company, Elena. Your father knew it. The board knew it. Everyone knew except you. So stubborn, so convinced you could prove everyone wrong, and you did, which made everything so much more complicated." "Who approached you?" Elena asked, and Marcus heard the calculation in her voice. Keep him talking. Buy time for security to arrive. "People who understand that innovation shouldn't be controlled by legacy and name recognition. People who could actually use Sterling Technologies' technology to change the world instead of protecting market share and shareholder profits." Brian moved closer, and Marcus shifted to maintain his position between them. "They offered me a real future. Chief Technology Officer of a combined entity that would dominate the industry. All I had to do was remove the obstacle." "You mean kill me?" "Remove." The stage light was supposed to be clean. Tragic accident, company in mourning, smooth transition to new leadership. But you had to have him. The gun gestured toward Marcus. "Playing maintenance hero. Ruined everything. So now we do this the hard way. Security is already coming. Building's on lockdown. You won't make it out." "I don't need to make it out. I just need her dead. They'll extract me after. New identity, new life, but only if I finished the job. The gun rose, pointing directly at Elena, and Marcus saw Brian's finger tighten on the trigger. He didn't think, didn't calculate odds, or consider consequences. He lunged sideways, slamming into Brian with all his weight, driving them both into the wall beside the door. The gun discharged, deafeningly loud in the enclosed space, the muzzle flash illuminating the office in stark white light. Marcus felt the bullet pass so close to his head the air pressure made his ear ring, but he was already moving, grabbing for Brian's wrist, trying to control the weapon. They crashed into furniture, struggling in near darkness, and Marcus realized with cold clarity that Brian was stronger than he looked, desperate enough to fight with everything he had. "Run!" Marcus shouted at Elena, not sure if she could hear him over the sound of his own pulse hammering. "Get out!" But Elena didn't run. He caught a glimpse of her moving in his peripheral vision, heard the crash of something heavy, her desk lamp connecting with Brian's skull. The CTO staggered, his grip on the gun loosening, and Marcus wrenched it away, sending it skittering across the floor into darkness. Brian recovered faster than Marcus expected, driving an elbow into his ribs that forced the air from his lungs. They went down together, hitting the floor hard, and Marcus felt hands close around his throat, squeezing with methodical pressure. Should have stayed invisible. Should have just fixed the lights and disappeared. But you had to play hero. Had to make yourself important to her. Now you die with her. Marcus's vision started to gray at the edges, his lungs screaming for air. He clawed at Brian's hands, trying to break the grip, but his strength was fading fast. Through the gathering darkness, he saw Elena searching frantically for something. Anything she could use as a weapon. Then light flooded the office, blinding after so much darkness, and voices shouted from multiple directions. The pressure on Marcus's throat released abruptly as security guards swarmed the room, pulling Brian away, forcing him to the ground. Marcus gasped for air, his throat raw, his vision clearing slowly. Strong hands helped him sit up, and suddenly Elena was there, kneeling beside him, her hands framing his face with desperate gentleness. "Marcus, can you hear me? Are you hurt?" He tried to speak, coughed instead, his throat burning. Elena's eyes were wide with fear he'd never seen there before, tears tracking down her cheeks, and he realized she was shaking. "I'm okay. Are you? Did he?" "I'm fine. You kept yourself between us. You threw yourself at a gun. You impossible, brave, stupid man. You could have died. Couldn't let him hurt you." Around them, security was securing Brian, reading him his rights, coordinating with the police teams flooding into the building. Detective Parker appeared in the doorway, taking in the scene with sharp eyes. "We got it all on audio. His confession, the mention of extraction and new identity. That plus the attempted murder will put him away for life, and we're already working on identifying his contacts based on the phone records we cracked an hour ago." "Good. Get him out of here. Get all of them out." Reed started to protest. "Ms. Sterling, we need statements, medical evaluation. Later. Everyone out. Now." They went. Reed looked reluctant. Brian was dragged away shouting threats and justifications that faded as they hauled him toward the elevators. Then the door closed and Marcus and Elena were alone in her office, surrounded by overturned furniture and the evidence of violence, both of them breathing hard. "You saved my life again." Elena's voice was quiet, wonder mixed with something deeper. "That's becoming a habit." Marcus tried to joke, but his voice was too rough, too raw. Don't make light of this. You threw yourself in front of a bullet for me. You could have died. But I didn't. We didn't. We're both still here. Because of you." The words came out fierce, almost angry. "Because you keep choosing to stand between me and people trying to destroy me, and I don't know what to do with that." She stopped, her voice breaking completely, and Marcus saw the moment when every wall she'd built came crashing down. The Ice Queen dissolved, leaving only Elena, terrified, grateful, completely undone by the weight of everything they'd survived together. I see you too. I see you, Marcus Chen, and I don't know when it happened, but somewhere between you walking in on me half-dressed and you tackling a man with a gun, I stopped being able to imagine facing any of this without you. Marcus's breath caught. They were still on the floor of her office, both of them bruised and bleeding, surrounded by chaos, and she was looking at him like he was the only solid thing in a world that had tried to kill her twice. I'm not going anywhere. Not now, not ever. If you'll let me stay. I don't deserve you. That's not your choice to make. I'm already here. Already yours, if you want me. The silence that followed felt endless, heavy with possibility and fear, and the bridge they were both standing on, deciding whether to cross or retreat to safer ground. Then Elena leaned forward and kissed him. It wasn't gentle or uncertain. It was desperate and fierce, tasting of salt from her tears and copper from his split lip, and Marcus kissed her back with everything he had, his hands finding her waist, pulling her closer. And she came willingly, pressing against him like she needed the contact to believe he was real. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Elena rested her forehead against his. This is complicated. I know. People will talk. The board, the employees, everyone will have opinions about the CEO and the maintenance tech. I know that too. And I'm still figuring out how to be human instead of just a position and a legacy. I've got time. As much as you need. Elena pulled back just enough to look at him, searching his face for doubt or hesitation. Whatever she saw there made her eyes fill with tears again, but this time she was smiling. You really mean that. Every word. You and me against corporate assassins. We make a pretty good team. Elena laughed, the sound watery but genuine, and kissed him again. Softer this time. Slower. Like they had all the time in the world, instead of security teams waiting outside and statements to give, and an empire that still needed protecting. But for this moment, in the darkness of her office, with emergency lights finally flickering to life, they were just two people who'd survived impossible odds and found something neither of them had been looking for: each other.